Epicscifies or die here. Tribe of beautiful giant women beg lost human to. Captain Lucas Hayes had never imagined that a routine exploration mission would end in such chaos. His ship, the Horizon, had been sent to investigate an uncharted planet in a distant galaxy. It was a small, quiet planet that hadn't shown any signs of life until now. Their scanners had detected some unusual energy signatures, and that was enough to pique the curiosity of humanity's top scientists. But now, as the ship's systems failed and the stars outside twisted into strange patterns, Lucas could only think of one thing: survival. The ship had crash-landed on the surface of the planet, tearing through the thick jungle of strange, bioluminescent trees. Inside the ship, alarms blared and debris scattered across the control room. The crew was shaken, but they were alive. Lucas quickly gathered his team, 5 men and women who had trained for missions like this, but none of them had expected something like this. "Everyone get to the exit," Lucas shouted, his voice cutting through the panic. "Move, move, move." As the crew scrambled to escape the wreckage, Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. They had no way of knowing what awaited them outside. The crash had left them stranded on a planet that was, as of now, an unknown world. His mind raced through the possibilities: hostile creatures, dangerous terrain, or even worse, intelligent life that could see them as a threat. When the last crew member, Lieutenant Mara Thompson, exited the ship, they all turned toward the dense, glowing forest that lay beyond. The air smelled sweet, almost like flowers, but Lucas didn't trust the smell. There was too much uncertainty, too much they didn't know. The wreckage of the Horizon lay behind them, a twisted heap of metal and wires, and they were alone. For hours, they made their way through the jungle, keeping an eye out for anything that could pose a danger. Strange creatures moved in the shadows, but none of them came too close. It seemed as if the planet was full of life, yet eerily silent. Then, as the sun began to set, something unexpected happened. A shadow moved overhead, and the entire jungle seemed to tremble. Lucas froze, raising a hand to stop his crew. The air was thick with tension. "Did you hear that?" Mara whispered, her eyes scanning the sky. Before anyone could respond, the ground shook beneath their feet. A low rumble echoed through the trees, and Lucas felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. From above, something massive descended, its form barely visible against the setting sun. It was a creature, but it wasn't like anything Lucas had ever seen before. The creature landed with a thunderous crash, sending a wave of dust and debris flying. As it stood, Lucas's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, at least it appeared to be, but she was no ordinary human. The giantess stood towering above them, her height nearly twice that of the tallest human. Her skin shimmered with a golden hue, and her eyes glowed a soft, otherworldly blue. She was dressed in intricate armor made of strange, organic material that seemed to pulse with energy. The giantess's presence was overwhelming. She looked down at the humans, her gaze curious but stern. The crew stood frozen, not knowing whether to run or to speak. She didn't look hostile, but then again, the sheer size of her made it difficult to think clearly. Another giantess appeared beside her, equally as tall and as commanding. Her skin was a deep, rich purple, and her eyes were a piercing green. Her armor was different, more fluid, almost like it was alive. She spoke in a language that Lucas didn't understand, her voice low and melodic, yet carrying an undeniable authority. "Captain Lucas Hayes." The first giantess spoke in perfect English, her voice a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground. "I am Empress Lyra of the Titaness tribe. You have trespassed on our sacred land. Why?" Lucas's mind raced, trying to process the situation. His crew had trained for first contact with alien species, but nothing could have prepared them for this. Giant women who seemed to possess advanced technology and knowledge. And here they were, standing on a planet where they were not welcome. "We didn't mean any harm," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming circumstances. "Our ship crashed. We're stranded here." Empress Lyra studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Your ship, it is damaged beyond repair. You are stranded." She glanced at the wreckage in the distance. "And you are now in the domain of the Titaness tribe." Lucas's crew exchanged nervous glances. This was nothing like any mission they had ever undertaken. The Titanesses were clearly powerful, and if they decided to see humanity as a threat, there would be little they could do to defend themselves. "We don't want trouble," Lucas continued, trying to remain calm. "We just need to survive. If you can help us repair our ship, we can leave. We won't cause any harm." The second giantess, who had remained silent, stepped forward. "Help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Why should we help you, humans? Your kind has no place on this world. You are fragile, weak." Lucas felt a chill run through him. This was no simple misunderstanding. They weren't just stranded, they were on a planet ruled by beings who saw them as little more than insects. "I don't want to fight," Lucas said, his voice firm. "But if we're going to survive, we need help. We're not just weak, humans are survivors, we adapt. If you help us, we can prove it." Empress Lyra looked down at him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "Prove it then," she said, her lips curling into a slight smile. "If you wish to survive here, you will have to earn our trust, but be warned, failure will not be tolerated." With that, the Titanesses turned and began to walk away, their massive forms disappearing into the jungle. Lucas watched them go, his mind spinning. This was just the beginning. There was so much more to this planet, and these women, these Titanesses, were at the center of it all. The crew stood silently for a moment before Lucas spoke again. "We don't have a choice," he said quietly. "We have to prove ourselves. If we don't, we might not leave this planet alive." The morning after their encounter with the Titanesses, Captain Lucas Hayes stood at the edge of the dense jungle, watching the towering figures of Empress Lyra and her companion disappear into the distance. The air felt heavy, thick with the unknown. His crew was silent, still processing the events of the previous night. It was clear now that they weren't on just any uncharted planet. They had landed in the territory of a powerful, ancient race, and their survival here would depend on more than just the ability to fix a damaged ship. "We have to follow them," Lucas said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was an edge of urgency in it. "We need their help if we're going to get off this planet." Lieutenant Mara Thompson, standing beside him, nodded. "But how do we prove ourselves to them? What if they don't care about our technology? What if they see us as nothing more than pests?" "We'll show them that we're not just weak," Lucas replied, his eyes still fixed on the jungle. "We'll earn their trust, or we won't leave this planet alive." The crew had no choice but to follow the Titanesses. As they moved deeper into the jungle, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant roar of some unknown creature. Despite the danger, the humans pressed on, moving with the hope that somehow they would find a way to survive. The journey was difficult. The jungle was dense, and the air was thick with moisture. The humans were not used to the oppressive heat or the strange, alien flora that seemed to stretch endlessly around them. Every step was a reminder of how different this world was, how far they were from home. But despite the challenges, Lucas remained focused. The Titanesses were their only hope. After hours of trekking through the jungle, the humans finally reached a large clearing. In the center stood a massive stone structure, unlike anything Lucas had ever seen. It was ancient, its surface carved with intricate symbols and patterns that seemed to glow faintly in the twilight. The stone walls were covered in moss and vines, but there was a sense of purpose to it, a feeling that it had once been something important. "This is where they live?" Mara asked, her voice filled with awe. Lucas nodded. "It looks like some kind of temple or stronghold. If they brought us here, it must be important." As they approached the structure, the ground beneath their feet rumbled, and Lucas felt a sudden wave of unease wash over him. The Titanesses were already waiting for them at the entrance. Empress Lyra stood at the top of a series of stone steps, her glowing eyes watching them closely. "You have followed us," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "Now you will prove that you are worthy of our assistance." Lucas stepped forward, trying to hide the nervousness he felt. "We will do whatever it takes. If you help us, we can offer you our knowledge and technology. We can work together." Empress Lyra studied him for a long moment before responding. "Knowledge and technology are not what you need here. What you need is strength, the strength to survive on our world, the strength to prove that your kind is not as weak as you appear." "Strength?" Lucas repeated, his mind racing. "What do you mean? We're not here to fight." The second Titaness, who had remained silent up until now, spoke. Her voice was soft but carried a cold edge. "On this world, only the strong survive. If you cannot prove that you have the strength to endure, you will not leave." "What do you want us to do?" Mara asked, her voice steady, though Lucas could see the tension in her eyes. Empress Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile. "You will survive our trials. Only then will you have earned our help." The humans exchanged uneasy glances. What kind of trials did the Titanesses have in mind? And more importantly, would they survive them? Without another word, Empress Lyra turned and motioned for them to follow. As they moved deeper into the temple, Lucas couldn't help but wonder what the Titanesses had planned. But there was no turning back now. If they wanted to live, they had to prove themselves. The first trial began in an open chamber deep within the temple. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols, and the air hummed with energy. In the center of the room was a large, circular pit filled with thick, bubbling mud. A stone platform hovered above the pit, and on it stood a series of strange, glowing crystals. "This is the trial of endurance," Empress Lyra explained, her voice echoing in the chamber. "You must retrieve the crystals, but beware, the pit is home to creatures that will stop you." Lucas's heart raced. He had no idea what kind of creatures they were dealing with, but he knew one thing: the Titanesses weren't going to make this easy. "You must act quickly," Empress Lyra continued. "If you hesitate, you will fail." Without another word, the Titanesses stepped back, allowing the humans to approach the pit. Lucas looked at his crew. They had no choice but to trust each other and work together. This was their only shot. "Ready?" Lucas asked, his voice steady but filled with determination. Mara nodded. "Let's do this." The moment they stepped forward, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The pit bubbled violently, and suddenly, massive tentacles shot up from the mud, each one thick and covered in sharp, barbed spikes. The creatures' slithering, writhing masses of flesh were clearly designed for combat. They moved with terrifying speed, their eyes glowing with a predatory gleam. Lucas instinctively pulled out a blaster from his side, but the creatures were too fast. He aimed and fired, but the beam seemed to do little more than cause the creature to retreat slightly before it surged forward again. "Get to the crystals," he shouted, realizing that fighting the creatures would waste time. The crew rushed forward, dodging the attacking tentacles and leaping from stone to stone across the slippery platform. But the creatures didn't give up. Every time one of them made a move, another one seemed to appear from the depths of the pit. "Come on, move," Mara yelled, her voice filled with urgency. Finally, Lucas reached one of the glowing crystals, grabbing it and holding it up. But just as he did, a massive tentacle shot out, wrapping around his ankle and pulling him toward the pit. His body slammed against the stone, and for a moment everything went black. "Lucas!" Mara cried, reaching out for him. But before the tentacle could drag him any further, a powerful force pulled it back. The second Titaness, who had been watching from the sidelines, extended her hand and summoned an energy blast that shattered the tentacle into pieces. "Get him out," she said, her voice commanding. With the Titaness's help, Lucas was pulled free and dragged to safety. His team, despite their exhaustion, continued to fight their way through the pit. Slowly but surely, they retrieved all the crystals and made it back to the edge. Breathing heavily, Lucas stood, looking at the Titanesses. They had passed the first trial, but just barely. "You have shown some strength," Empress Lyra said, her voice soft with approval. "But this is only the beginning." After their success in the first trial, Captain Lucas Hayes and his crew found themselves facing a new challenge. They had proven their endurance, but the Titanesses had made it clear that their trials would not be easy. As they gathered in the ancient stone chamber, the air seemed to grow heavier, and the distant sounds of the jungle beyond faded. This was not the world they had crash-landed on. It was a place of ancient power, and the Titanesses were its guardians. Empress Lyra stood before them, her towering figure casting a long shadow over the humans. Beside her, the second Titaness, a silent observer, looked on with a piercing gaze. Her eyes, glowing green, never left the humans. "You have passed the trial of endurance," Empress Lyra began, her voice deep and resonant. "But strength alone is not enough. The next trial will test your minds, your wisdom, and your ability to adapt." Lucas wiped the sweat from his brow. The first trial had pushed them to their limits, but it was clear that the Titanesses weren't just looking for survival. They wanted to see if humanity had the intellectual capacity to thrive on their world. "Before we begin," Empress Lyra continued, "understand this: there is no failure. If you do not succeed, you will remain here and you will never leave." The gravity of her words hit hard, and the crew exchanged uneasy glances. There was no room for error. Their survival depended on these trials, and failing would leave them stranded forever, alone on this strange and unforgiving planet. "Follow me," Empress Lyra said, turning without another word. The crew followed, stepping deeper into the ancient temple. As they walked, Lucas couldn't help but notice the walls of the temple. They were covered in symbols, intricate patterns that seemed to shift as if they had a life of their own. The air was thick with an odd, almost hypnotic energy, as though the temple itself was alive, watching them. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at another chamber. This one was different. Instead of the open space they had been used to, the room was narrow, its walls lined with intricate carvings. In the center of the room was a massive stone pillar, surrounded by floating, glowing orbs. They hovered just above the ground, gently bobbing in the air as if waiting for something. "Welcome to the trial of the mind," Empress Lyra announced. "This trial will test your intellect, your creativity, and your ability to solve problems. You will need to work together to unlock the secrets of the chamber. Only when you have done so will you pass." Lucas looked at the glowing orbs. The challenge seemed straightforward at first: solve the puzzle, move on, and survive. But there was something about the room that felt unsettling. The orbs didn't seem like just lights, they seemed to be connected to the very fabric of the temple itself. "You have 1 hour," Empress Lyra said. "Begin." The second Titaness stepped back, crossing her arms as she observed them. Her eyes narrowed, waiting to see how they would respond. Lucas felt the weight of the moment. This trial wasn't just about brute force. It was about thinking quickly, understanding the challenge, and solving it. He turned to his team, knowing they had to work together if they were going to succeed. "All right," Lucas said, his voice firm. "We need to figure out how these orbs work. Everyone, look around the room. The symbols on the walls, they might be part of the puzzle." Mara, the sharpest strategist of the group, stepped forward and began inspecting the carvings on the walls. "These symbols, they seem to match the patterns on the orbs. I think each orb corresponds to a different symbol." "We need to figure out the right order," Lucas said. "But how?" Mara furrowed her brow. "Look at the center of the pillar. There's a depression in the stone. I think we need to place the orbs in that order to unlock something." The crew began to work quickly. They examined the glowing orbs, each one pulsating with light, while the symbols on the walls seemed to shimmer and shift in response to their movements. As they worked, the tension in the air grew. Every move they made seemed to trigger new responses from the room, low hums, the faint vibration of the stone beneath their feet. It felt like the temple itself was alive, watching, waiting. Lucas reached for one of the orbs. As his fingers brushed the surface, a pulse of energy shot through his hand, making his arm tingle. He quickly pulled his hand away, but the orb continued to hover, waiting for the next move. "This is more than just a puzzle," Lucas said, his voice low. "It's a test of our ability to understand energy, to work with the environment. We need to think of it as a whole." The crew continued working together, each contributing their insights. One by one, they placed the orbs on the pillar in the correct order, matching the symbols on the wall with the glowing orbs. As the last orb settled into place, the ground beneath them trembled. The orbs began to glow brighter, their light intensifying as the symbols on the wall shifted, revealing a hidden passageway. "Is it done?" Mara asked, her voice filled with both relief and doubt. Empress Lyra's voice echoed through the chamber. "You have done well. But remember, this trial was only a glimpse of what lies ahead. There is much more to this world, and to us, than you can imagine." With a loud grinding noise, the stone wall before them slid open, revealing a narrow passageway leading deeper into the temple. "Proceed," Empress Lyra commanded, "but do not become complacent. The next trial awaits." The humans stepped forward, their hearts pounding with a mixture of relief and nervousness. They had passed the trial of the mind, but the tightnesses were clear. Their survival here would require more than just intellect and endurance. It would require everything they had: strength, intelligence, and the will to succeed. As they moved through the passageway, Lucas couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This place, this ancient temple, was more than just a series of challenges. It was a test of everything humanity stood for, and with every trial they were learning more about themselves. They had been forced to face their weaknesses, and now they were stronger for it. "Stay focused," Lucas said to his crew. "We're not done yet. There's more to come." They continued on, knowing that the next challenge could be their toughest yet. But no matter what the tightnesses threw at them, they were ready. They had come this far, and they would not give up now. The passage ahead was narrow, the walls pulsing with an eerie light as Lucas Hayes and his crew moved deeper into the ancient temple. Their hearts were still racing from the trial of the mind, but they knew that the hardest part of their journey was yet to come. The tightnesses had made it clear. Surviving the trials wasn't just about proving themselves, it was about surviving their world. As they walked, the air grew colder, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, as though the very temple itself was alive. The further they moved, the more intense the energy became, and Lucas couldn't help but feel as if they were being drawn into something much bigger than they had anticipated. Empress Lyra's voice echoed through the stone corridor. "You are nearing the final trial. If you fail, your fate will be sealed, but if you succeed, you will earn the right to return to your ship." Lucas nodded, his mind focused. They had no choice but to succeed. The thought of failure was too overwhelming to consider. His crew had worked together, fought together, and survived the trials. But this final test would push them to their limits and beyond. As they entered the next chamber, the temperature dropped sharply. The walls were lined with strange, shimmering stones, and the air was thick with an unnatural fog. The room was vast, the ceiling lost in shadow, and in the center, a massive stone altar stood. Above it, a swirling vortex of dark energy spun, its colors shifting and twisting like a living thing. "You are here," Empress Lyra said, her voice softer now, almost contemplative. "This is the trial of sacrifice. You must prove your willingness to give everything for survival, your strength, your pride, and your very will." Lucas stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the vortex above. "What do we have to do?" His voice was steady, but his mind raced. Was this trial a test of their physical abilities, or was it something more? The second tightness, who had remained silent during the previous trials, spoke for the first time. This trial is not about brute force. It is about your ability to sacrifice for the greater good. Each of you must face your deepest fears and make a choice. Only then will the trial be complete. Lucas's heart skipped a beat. A test of their fears. They had already faced so much, but this was something different. What kind of choices would they be forced to make? Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet rumbled and the fog thickened. Lucas could feel it pressing against him, as though the very air was alive, trying to suffocate him. His crew moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the dark shadows around them. The swirling vortex above seemed to pull at the very core of their beings. One by one, the crew members began to step forward, drawn toward the altar at the center of the chamber. As they approached, the shadows in the room seemed to move, swirling around them like tendrils. Each of them felt a sharp, cold chill as their deepest fears began to take shape in the darkness. Mara Thompson was the first to react. She stopped dead in her tracks, her face pale. No, not this. Her voice was shaky, barely a whisper. The air seemed to shimmer, and before her, the shadows took the form of her greatest fear, the loss of her family. Figures of her loved ones appeared, but they were fading, disappearing, as if being pulled away by some invisible force. "Please don't take them from me," Mara whispered, her voice breaking. She reached out to them, but the figures only continued to fade. Lucas watched as his friends struggled. This was it, the moment where they would have to face what they feared most. But there was no time to waste. They had to succeed. "Mara," Lucas called, stepping toward her. "You can't let it control you. This is just an illusion. You're stronger than this." With a gasp, Mara's eyes snapped open and she looked at Lucas. She took a deep breath, letting the fear wash over her but not letting it take hold. Slowly, the figures of her family began to fade and the darkness around them receded. Mara turned to the others. "I'm ready," she said, her voice stronger than before. The next to face their fear was Lieutenant Adam Cruz. He stepped forward and the shadows shifted once again. In front of him appeared an image of the battlefield. His soldiers, comrades he had once led, falling one by one to the enemy's onslaught. The cries of the dying echoed around him and he felt the weight of their deaths heavy on his heart. "No," Adam shouted, his fists clenched. "I couldn't save them." Lucas could see the pain in Adam's eyes. The guilt, the sorrow, it was consuming him. But like Mara, he couldn't let the darkness control him. He had to overcome it. "Adam," Lucas said, his voice firm, "you didn't fail them. You fought with everything you had. They would be proud of you." Adam hesitated for a moment, but then, with a deep breath, he looked around. The figures of his fallen soldiers began to fade, the battlefield dissolving. Adam's shoulders relaxed and he turned back to face Lucas, a faint smile on his lips. "I'm with you. Let's finish this." One by one, the others faced their own fears. Lieutenant Kelly Nguyen, who had always feared failure, stood tall as the image of her own shortcomings appeared before her. Sergeant Ivan Kuznetsov, haunted by the memory of the mission that went wrong, had to confront his own doubts. Each of them faced the darkness, and each of them found a way to push through it, refusing to let the illusions control them. Finally, it was Lucas's turn. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the presence of the darkness pressing against his mind. And then before him, the shadows took shape. He saw a vision of Earth destroyed, cities reduced to rubble, the oceans poisoned, and the sky filled with smoke. He saw his people, his family, dying in the ruins, and in the center of it all was his own failure. He had been too weak to save them, too powerless to stop the destruction. "No," Lucas whispered, his voice cracking. "This can't be real." The vision of Earth's destruction became clearer, more vivid. He saw the face of his younger sister, her eyes filled with fear, reaching out to him for help. But Lucas could do nothing. He was powerless to save her. The fear was overwhelming. It was a crushing weight, a deep ache in his chest. He wanted to run, to hide from the vision that was suffocating him, but he knew deep down that he couldn't. He couldn't let Earth fall into ruin. He couldn't let humanity die without a fight. Lucas, a voice called soft and steady. It was Mara. She had faced her own fears and was now standing beside him, reaching out her hand. "Don't give up," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We're here. Together we'll fight. You're not alone." Lucas looked at her, and for a moment the vision of Earth's destruction faded. He took a deep breath and turned away from the darkness. He wasn't alone. They weren't alone. Slowly, the shadows receded and the swirling vortex above them began to calm. The trial was over. The room grew still and the air lightened. Empress Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the humans. "You have passed. You have proven that you are worthy of survival. Your willingness to face your fears and to overcome them is what sets you apart." Lucas breathed a sigh of relief. They had done it. They had survived. "Return to your ship," Empress Lyra said. "You are free to leave. But remember this. The strength you have shown here will serve you in the challenges ahead. The universe is vast and there are many more trials to come." The crew turned to leave the temple, their steps lighter than before. They had faced the darkest parts of themselves, and they had emerged victorious. As they walked toward the exit, Lucas felt a sense of pride swelling in his chest. They had proven their worth, not just to the Titanesses but to themselves. They were ready for whatever came next.